And our next segment is actually going to be one of the things that has been one of the most popular things that we've done since the start of the pandemic, which is our Art Talks. So it's our Art Talk number 40. And so when I was at a theater, this was a number of years ago, there was a play titled Red. And I was actually, I think, in the first row, and I was actually spattered with red paint all over my clothes. I don't recall if there was a footnote in the playbill about about possible damage to my clothes, but the play was actually about Mark Rothko and his life, an incredibly intense artist. And speaking of brand, he had a really unique brand and a message in his art. And it's kind of interesting. We SMA, we constantly communicate through our presentations to clients through PowerPoint decks and other things. And we've been, I think, improving our ability, our own unique brand particularly in terms of how it relates to Todd. So this would actually be a good day for modern art. And so I want to introduce you to an artist in her own right, Sarah Kane, who will talk to us about Mark Rothko and Art Talk number 40.
Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday. So Mark Rothko, who was actually born Marcus Rothkowitz, was an American painter working in the 1930s through the 1960s. And he was born in what is now Latvia in 1903, but fled Jewish persecution with his family and settled in Portland, Oregon. He excelled in high school and ended up attending Yale University, studying liberal arts and science, among which he studied philosophy, psychology, engineering, biology, so many different topics. He really loved to learn and broaden his perspective on the world. But ultimately, art is where his attention was more focused. And he dropped out of Yale in 1923 before graduating and moved to New York City, the burgeoning center of the American artistic universe. So while in New York, Rothko took a class at the Art Students League with a teacher named Max Weber. And this would turn out to be Rothko's only real artistic training. Weber was one of the only teachers that embraced European modernism at the time. So Rothko was really drawn to him, and Weber ended up having a profound influence on Rothko's works. He encouraged Rothko to work in a more figurative sense rather than literal as, say, realism or impressionism. So while Rothko didn't want to be associated with any particular art movement, he is widely regarded as one of the focal artists of abstract expressionism. Other artists in that category would be, say, Jackson Pollock, Willem de Kooning. And so this post-World War II movement is usually categorized with gestural strokes or markings, as we will see in Rothko's more mature period of his career. So let's take a look at some of his work. So this painting is called Entrance to Subway, done in 1938, and was one of Rothko's earlier pieces, and is part of a larger series of paintings called the Subway series. It is before he found his signature style of color field painting, which we'll get into in a moment. And so I mentioned before that abstract expressionism is more gestural strokes on a canvas, but as you can see, this painting is still very recognizable as a subway scene. It's not entirely abstract, but maybe more representative or reflective of the times. And this painting represents the isolation and loneliness of the Great Depression. This was, remember, done in 1938. And the National Gallery of Art says that, quote, windows, portals, and walls serve as structural and expressive devices of confinement. Rothko shows the subway as a measured yet eccentric place. So this is called White Center, painted in 1950. And this style of painting, called color field, is synonymous with Rothko's works. This became his signature style, and White Center was one of his first paintings in this style. The painting is divided up into these kind of horizontal bands of color, using either complementary or contrast colors. Can everyone hear me? I'm hearing a bit of an echo. Okay, so the painting is divided up into these horizontal bands of color, using either these complementary or contrasting colors to evoke a certain response. So here he uses these washes of color to evoke spiritual or intellectual responses. And the colors in this painting evoke a sense of warmth, brightness, happiness. He really wanted to focus on the emotional response that these paintings give to the viewer. And so with these color field paintings, he wanted to remove all obstacles between the painter, the painting, and the viewer, and he just wanted the color to envelop the viewer. Rothko was very particular about who he sold his art to, and it said that he would not sell his art to someone who didn't have the quote unquote correct reaction, whatever that meant. But this painting was sold to the royal family of Qatar for over $72 million, making it one of the most expensive post-war paintings ever sold. So as you can see by that, Rothko was really particular with the projects that he took on and who he sold his art to. He was could be very finicky sometimes, and he really stood up for his beliefs to the point of actually self-sabotage. For example, he protested an award being given to him by the Guggenheim Foundation because he felt that art should not be competitive. But in 1965, he was commissioned by John and Dominique de Menil to help construct a non-denominational chapel in Houston, Texas. So the chapel contains 14 Rothko murals that cover the walls, and Rothko worked closely with the architect and was actually given almost full control in terms of the shape of the building and the colors he used. So you can see he used these kind of dark purplish tones that represent Rothko's melancholic last few years of his life and give the building kind of a meditative, intimate tone. In the year 2000, the Rothko Chapel was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. So this painting is actually untitled, but it's part of Rothko's last series of paintings titled the Black Series in 1969. And these paintings kind of confirmed and reflected the pain that Rothko was feeling about people's perception of his art. In 1968, a year before, Rothko suffered an aortic aneurysm and spent 3 weeks in the hospital. And this brush with death would shadow him for the rest of his life. He really became resentful that his work was not being paid the proper respect and reverence and attention that he felt it deserved. And the Guggenheim states that this painting is, quote, drained of color and choked by a white border, and indicate that, as Rothko asserted, his paintings are about death. And later that year, Rothko unfortunately committed suicide. So overall, Rothko really distanced himself from the classification of his work as these kind of non-objective, color-filled paintings. And he really stressed that his paintings were based on human emotions of tragedy and ecstasy and doom and all of these things. As I mentioned before, he really wanted the viewer to stand in front of the painting and just be enveloped by color and have whatever reaction that makes the viewer have. And so I will just end with this quote. To stand in front of a Rothko is to be in the presence of the pulsing vibrancy of his enormous canvases. It is to feel, if only momentarily, something of the sublime spirituality he relentlessly sought to evoke. Thank you.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's incredible. He's an incredible artist. Absolutely. In fact,